right, so today we're diving into Rewire by Nicole Vignola.
Yeah.
And, you sent this in, and it's all about kind of unlocking lasting change by, like, really understanding how our brains work. So
Yeah.
did you have a chance to, like, really dig into this?
Yeah, I have. And it's really interesting how she kind of takes this concept of neuroplasticity that I think a lot of people have heard about,
Right.
but she really dives into like practical application.
Yeah.
She doesn't just explain, that your brain can change. She gives you a toolkit to make those changes happen.
Okay, so for anyone listening who's like, wait, what is neuroplasticity again?
Right.
It's basically like our brain's ability to change and adapt, like throughout our lives.
Exactly.
It's not, it's like we've been walking down the same path for years, but we can still make new trails.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And the book actually uses the analogy of like well-trodden paths versus new trails in the brain
Oh, cool.
to illustrate how habits form.
I like that.
And what's so empowering about that is that it means that we're not stuck with our current mental state or behaviors.
Like we can actually change.
Yes, you can reshape those pathways with conscious effort.
Wow. So it's not just about understanding our brains, but like taking control of how they're wired.
Exactly.
And one of the things that she talks about is this information diet.
Yes.
And I think that's so interesting. Like what we feed our minds on a daily basis has such a huge impact
Huge.
on how we feel
Yeah.
and even our self-image.
Absolutely. And she draws this parallel to our physical diet,
Oh, yeah.
We know that if you're eating junk food all the time,
Yeah.
it makes us feel sluggish.
Makes you feel bad.
It can lead to health problems.
Totally.
And similarly, consuming a lot of negative or superficial information can actually be detrimental to your mental well-being.
Which makes you think about, social media, constantly scrolling. You see these perfectly curated lives.
Yeah,
And it's so easy to like get caught in that trap of comparing,
absolutely.
feeling inadequate or like anxious.
It can trigger all sorts of negative emotions.
And she even talks about how using social media before bed can disrupt sleep.
Oh, yeah.
And then that lack of sleep just makes you crave instant gratification even more the next day.
Exactly. It feeds into this cycle of seeking more and more instant gratification.
So then how do we get out of that trap?
Well, she suggests that we need to become more mindful of our information diet.
Okay.
Just like we choose, healthy foods to nourish our bodies, we need to be selective about the content we consume to nourish our minds.
So it's not about cutting everything out, but just being more aware.
Right. It's about being aware of how certain content makes you feel
Yeah.
and choosing to focus on information that uplifts and inspires you.
So that actually brings us to another point she makes, which is discipline over motivation,
Right.
which I think we all struggle with.
We all do.
You start a new habit with all this motivation.
Yeah, you get all fired up.
And then it just fizzles out.
And then you're like, where did that go?
So she's saying that discipline is actually the key to making lasting change.
Yes, discipline is about showing up consistently even when you don't feel like it.
And that's so hard.
It is, but it's essential.
So it's like we're trying to build these new pathways in our brains,
Exactly.
even when they want to go back to those old familiar ones.
Your brain's natural inclination is to go to what's easiest, what's most familiar.
And she uses this analogy in the book to describe it.
Yeah.
Imagine your brain is like a big field,
Right.
and your habits are the paths.
Exactly.
And those old habits, they're like paved roads,
Yes.
lined with flowers and, streetlights even.
Yeah, it's the easy route.
And then the new habits are like those little dirt paths.
Yeah, barely visible in the grass.
And so our brains are naturally going to go to the easier path.
Right, because it's comfortable.
So we have to almost like lay down concrete blocks and put up streetlights to make those new paths more appealing.
Exactly. You have to make it easier for your brain to choose that new path over the old one.
So then how do we cultivate that discipline?
Well, it starts with understanding that it's a process. It's not about being perfect or never slipping up.
So we're going to mess up.
You will, but that's okay.
Okay.
It's about recognizing those moments when you're tempted to fall back into old patterns
Right.
and making a conscious choice to stick with the new behavior.
She also talks about fear and how fear plays a part in this whole thing.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like we self-sabotage because we're afraid.
Yeah, we're afraid of the unknown.
Right.
So we stay in those comfortable ruts, even if they're not good for us.
Because it feels safer.
Exactly. The familiar feels safer than the uncertainty of change.
Right. But she's saying we don't have to be fearless to be brave.
Right.
It's more about acknowledging our fears and then acting anyway.
It's about taking action despite the fear.
And she even uses Novak Djokovic as an example.
Oh, yeah, that's a great one.
He admits to feeling fear before matches,
Yeah, he's human.
but he doesn't let it stop him.
He uses it as fuel.
So it's like fear can actually be a motivator.
It can if you approach it the right way.
And that leads us to the whole role of dopamine
Yes. Dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter.
and how that affects motivation and habit formation.
Exactly. So we were talking about fear, right? And how it can actually motivate us
Right.
if we approach it in the right way.
If you kind of rewire how you think about it.
Exactly. It's all about rewiring those neural pathways to respond differently
Okay.
to those feelings of feel. And
Yeah.
that's where dopamine comes into play.
Okay, so remind me again about dopamine.
Yeah. So dopamine is basically a chemical messenger in the brain that's closely tied to our reward system.
Okay.
So it's released when we experience something pleasurable.
Like what kinds of things?
Well, it could be anything from like eating a delicious meal to achieving a goal or even just scrolling through your social media feed.
Oh, so it's like your brain saying, hey, that was good. Let's do that again.
Exactly. It creates that feeling of satisfaction and it motivates us to repeat those behaviors.
Makes sense, but like not all dopamine hits are created equal, right?
Right, exactly. And that's a really important point.
Okay.
Some activities trigger those really quick, intense bursts of dopamine,
Oh, yeah.
giving us that instant gratification.
Right.
But those feelings, they fade quickly, leaving us wanting more.
That sounds a lot like the social media thing. Get that little dopamine hit every time you see a notification or like,
Right, and it's very fleeting.
and then you just want more and more and more.
And you end up constantly seeking that next hit.
Okay, so then what's the problem with that?
Well, the problem is that when we become too reliant on those quick dopamine fixes,
Okay.
it actually lowers our overall motivation
Oh, really?
and makes it harder to engage in activities that require more effort.
Oh, so it's like we're training our brains to just want the easy stuff.
Exactly. You're training your brain to prefer the easy, instant rewards over those activities that might be more challenging,
But better for you.
but ultimately more fulfilling and more rewarding in the long run.
So like we're building those super highways to instant gratification.
Yes.
But then the roads to like meaningful stuff are all overgrown.
Exactly. And it creates this vicious cycle.
Oh, no.
We become less motivated to pursue those long-term goals,
Right.
more prone to procrastination, and even more susceptible to addiction.
Because we just want those hits.
We're always chasing that next dopamine hit.
So then if we're trying to rewire our brains,
Yes.
we need to like break free from this.
You need to break free from that cycle of instant gratification.
Okay.
It's about cultivating a healthier relationship with dopamine.
Okay, so how do you do that?
Well, Vignola suggests focusing on activities that promote sustainable dopamine increases.
Okay, so like what does that even mean, sustainable dopamine?
These are activities that challenge us, they require effort,
Okay.
and they offer a sense of accomplishment.
So instead of those quick hits, it's more like,
It's a more gradual and sustained release of dopamine,
Okay.
which ultimately helps you build stronger motivation and resilience.
got it. So what kind of activities are we talking about?
Well, it could be things like learning a new skill, engaging in creative pursuits, or even just taking a cold shower.
Wait, hold on. Cold showers.
I know it sounds a bit crazy,
It does.
but cold exposure has actually been shown to trigger a significant release of dopamine.
Really?
It might not be the most comfortable experience in the moment,
No.
but the after effects can be incredibly invigorating and motivating.
Okay, I'm willing to try it, but I'm getting the sense that it's not just about adding new things.
Right.
It's also about cutting back on the other stuff.
Exactly. It's all about finding that balance.
Okay.
We don't need to completely eliminate all sources of instant gratification,
Okay.
but we need to be more conscious of how much we rely on them and how they affect our overall motivation.
So it's like we're becoming the architects of our own reward system,
Exactly.
like choosing those things that lead to real fulfillment.
It's about recognizing those deeply ingrained pathways in our brains that lead to instant gratification.
Right.
And consciously choosing to create new paths, new habits that support our long-term well-being.
It's hard, though.
It is, but it's possible.
I like how she emphasizes that we're not stuck with our wiring.
We're not. Our brains are constantly changing and adapting.
But we really can change,
You absolutely can.
even if it feels daunting.
It's a process, and it takes time.
Small steps.
Exactly. Small, consistent steps can lead to remarkable transformations over time.
Like those little changes add up.
They do. It's like compound interest.
Oh, yeah.
You make small investments consistently over time, and they grow exponentially.
I like that analogy, and it makes it seem a little less scary.
It's about shifting your perspective and focusing on the long game.
And she also talks about being kind to yourself,
Yes, self-compassion is crucial.
because we're all going to mess up.
We all will. It's part of the process.
So it's not about being perfect. It's about learning from those mistakes.
Exactly, and using them as opportunities to grow.
And that kind of brings us back to fear. We talked about how acknowledging our fears can be motivating.
Right.
But how do we actually move forward when we feel afraid?
It's about reframing your relationship with fear.
Okay.
Instead of seeing it as an enemy.
Like a bad thing.
We need to recognize it as a natural part of the growth process.
Oh, so it's like a signal that you're doing something right.
It can be. It's a sign that you're stepping outside of your comfort zone.
And growing.
And moving in the right direction.
Instead of seeing it as a sign to back down, it's like a sign that you're about to do something amazing.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that those moments of discomfort, those moments when we feel fear, are often the moments when we're pushing ourselves to grow and expand.
I like that.
And remember, true bravery isn't about the absence of fear.
Right.
It's about acting in spite of it.
So even when you feel scared, keep going.
Keep going.
Because each step you take is a step closer to
to becoming the best version of yourself.
And that reminds me of the information diet stuff.
Yes.
It's not just about what we read and watch.
It's also about the voices we allow into our heads.
Oh yeah, those internal narratives.
They can have a huge impact on how we perceive and respond to challenges.
So we need to cultivate a positive internal dialogue.
Yes, one that encourages you to embrace challenges, to believe in yourself, and to keep moving forward even when you feel afraid.
Easier said than done.
It takes practice, but it's worth it.
And she talks about our brains constantly rewiring themselves.
Right, it's called experience-dependent neuroplasticity.
So everything we do shapes our brains.
Every experience, every thought, every action.
It's kind of a lot of pressure.
It can feel that way, but it's also incredibly empowering.
Because we have more power than we realize.
Exactly. You have the power to shape who you are and who you want to become.
But how do we actually do that?
Yeah, so that's what's so great about this book,
Yeah.
is that it's not just theory.
Right.
Vignola gives us a ton of actionable strategies,
Okay.
and they're all based on solid research.
Cool.
So one of the most important things she talks about is repetition and consistency.
So it's not about making a huge change overnight.
Right. It's about those small, consistent efforts that you make day after day.
Like building those new trails.
Remember that analogy with the brain being like a field
Yeah.
with the well-worn paths and the new trails?
Right.
So creating lasting change, it's like forging those new trails.
Okay.
It takes time and it takes repeated effort
Yeah.
to make those new pathways strong and accessible.
For your brain to actually want to use them. And it's important to be patient.
Oh, absolutely.
Because, change isn't linear.
We're going to stumble. We're going to fall back into old patterns.
And that's okay.
It's all part of the process.
It's those setbacks are actually good.
They are.
Because they teach us.
They help us identify our triggers.
Yeah.
They help us refine our strategies, and they help us build that resilience.
To keep going.
Exactly, because you're going to need it.
Yeah. So one of the tips she gives is to just start with one thing.
Yeah, pick one habit you want to change.
Like what kind of thing?
It could be something small, like drinking more water throughout the day.
Right.
Or something bigger, like overcoming a fear or finally pursuing that dream you've been putting off.
That's a good one.
It's about choosing something that really resonates with you,
Yeah.
something that you're genuinely motivated to work on.
Okay, so then what?
Then you create a plan.
Like an action plan.
Yeah, break down that big goal into smaller, more manageable steps.
Okay.
And try to anticipate those obstacles.
Because they're going to come.
They will, so you have to be prepared.
So you have a plan for when you mess up.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of support.
Like having a friend or someone.
Yeah, a friend, a family member, a therapist, even in an online community.
Like an accountability buddy.
Exactly. Having someone to cheer you on, to hold you accountable,
Yeah.
to offer encouragement can make a huge difference.
It's like you're on this hike
I love that analogy.
and you have a hiking buddy.
Someone to share the journey with.
And you're celebrating along the way.
Yes, celebrate those milestones.
Those little wins.
Even the small victories, they matter.
Because they reinforce those new pathways.
And they keep you motivated.
So you don't give up.
Keep going.
And she talks about visual reminders.
Oh, yeah, those can be super helpful.
Like vision boards or sticky notes.
Yeah, anything that helps you stay focused on your goals.
Like a screensaver on your phone.
Exactly. It's all about creating an environment that supports the changes you want to make.
And that goes back to the information diet stuff.
It all ties together.
Right.
It's not just about the actions you take, but also the information you're feeding your mind.
Right. Like what are we reading? What are we watching? Who are we listening to?
Are you surrounding yourself with messages that support your growth or messages that feed your doubts and fears?
We got to be weeding out those negative thoughts,
Exactly. It's like curating a mental garden.
planting those seeds of positivity.
Yes, self-belief and growth.
So this book is like giving us the tools to do that.
It's not just a theoretical exploration of neuroplasticity.
Right.
It's a practical guidebook,
With real strategies.
actionable strategies for creating lasting change.
And I think the most powerful message is that we have more control
Than we think.
over our brains and our lives.
We're not just products of our genes or our past experiences.
Right.
We have the ability to choose.
To choose who we become.
To choose the thoughts, the behaviors, the habits that shape who we are and who we want to be.
It's pretty amazing to think that we can change like that.
It is. It's incredibly empowering.
And we all have this potential.
We all do. It's within each of us.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this question.
Okay.
What choices are you going to make today to shape the person you want to become?
What new trails are you going to blaze? What old paths are you going to let go of?
It's a journey,
It is an ongoing journey.
and Rewire gives us the tools to navigate that path
With intention, with awareness,
and with a belief in our own potential.
our incredible potential for transformation.
Thanks for joining us.